Well,
Our catcher out. It doesn't matter your skin color. The important thing is that I love you.
He watched the woman he loved get whipped in front of everyone, her cries silenced by fear, her body broken for speaking the truth. But what no one knew was that he, the son of the man who ordered it, had a secret burning inside him. He would risk everything, his name, his life, his future for her. In a world where love between them meant death, they chose each other. But every step closer put them in greater danger. This isn't just a story about love. It's about defying the rules of a cruel world and daring to escape it. If you believe love should never be punished, comment below. Love is stronger than fear. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the silence of the field. Her skin broke, but her spirit somehow did not. The air was thick with heat and tension, heavy as the sky above the fields. The workers stood frozen in a circle, eyes low, backs straight, breaths held. No one dared speak, no one dared move. At the center of the yard, tied to a worn wooden post, stood Lena, young, proud, and trembling. Her wrists were bound tight, the rope biting into her skin. Her blouse, already torn from the scuffle, clung to her back in soaked patches from sweat and fear. Dust clung to her bare feet. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. A hush blanketed the gathering like a funeral. "Speak again out of turn," the overseer had growled earlier, "and you'll remember the taste of silence." And now, punishment, public, swift, merciless. The whip uncoiled from his belt with a hiss, and Lena closed her eyes just in time to hear it slice through the air. Crack! Her body jerked. A single strangled scream escaped her lips, sharp and raw, but the field swallowed it whole. No one looked up. Not even the birds dared interrupt. She didn't cry again. She held her chin high, teeth gritted, eyes open now, glassy with pain but glowing with defiance. Each lash landed like lightning, violent and unrelenting. The skin on her back split in thin, red rivers, but she did not beg, did not fall. At the edge of the crowd, just behind a row of barrels, Thomas Whitmore stood still as stone. He was tall, clean-cut, dressed in a white shirt too fine for the dirt around him. His jaw was clenched so tight it trembled. His fists, buried in his pockets, curled until his nails pierced his skin. His eyes never left her. "Damn it," he whispered under his breath, barely audible. "Stop, please, just stop." But no one could hear him over the whip. The overseer paused between strikes, wiping sweat from his brow, then turned back to Lena. "Let this be a lesson to all of you," he bellowed. The silence deepened. The message had been sent, but in Thomas's chest, something twisted. Rage, yes, but something more dangerous bloomed there too, something forbidden. No one noticed the way his eyes burned, not with hate, but with love. The night crept over the plantation like a shroud. The cicadas sang their endless dirge in the thick southern air, and the lanterns in the main house flickered out one by one, swallowed by the weight of darkness. Somewhere in the far shed, a rusted door creaked under the wind, but no one stirred. The day had drained everyone, some from labor, others from the violence they had witnessed and dared not speak of. Lena lay on her side on a straw-stuffed mattress in the back corner of the workers' quarters. Every breath was a challenge. Her back, wrapped in stained cloth, pulsed with pain. The wounds from the whip were still fresh, raw and open, each movement searing. Sweat glued her hair to her forehead, and her lips were dry from the heat and from the tears she hadn't allowed to fall. She didn't cry. She never cried. Not in front of them. But now, with the moon as her only witness, her fingers trembled against her chest, not out of weakness, but from the memory, the sting, the shame, the silence of the crowd. She had expected pain. She had not expected indifference. She shifted, biting down hard as the pain flared. Her arms were weak, but she lifted her hand to her mouth, trying to quiet the groan escaping her throat. A sudden sound broke the night, a soft knock on the outside of the shed. Lena's eyes flew open. Her whole body tensed. No one came here at this hour. Not unless there was more punishment. Not unless someone had something to take. She pulled herself up slightly, winced, and reached for the small wooden plank she kept hidden beneath the cot. It wasn't much, but it had once kept a rat at bay. Another knock. "Go away," she rasped, but the door creaked open. Light spilled in from a small lantern. A shadow moved in the doorway. She blinked, stunned. "Lena," a voice whispered, deep, hesitant. It was him, Thomas. He stepped into the room slowly, shutting the door behind him. The lantern's glow lit his face, pale, troubled, eyes wide with something between guilt and urgency. In his hand, a bundle of cloth. On his shoulder, a worn satchel. She tried to sit up straighter, her heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. He looked around the shed, then moved toward her. "I brought some things for the wounds," he said softly. "Herbs, clean bandages, water." She stared at him, unblinking. Her arms trembled again, not from pain this time, but from uncertainty. He crouched beside her, laying down the satchel. "May I?" he asked. She hesitated. This was the master's son, the same one whose father had ordered her punishment, the same boy who used to ride horses past the fields, pretending not to see the ones bent over picking cotton. He shouldn't be here. This was dangerous for both of them, but there had always been something strange about him, the way he looked at her, not with pity, but with something that scared her even more. Recognition. She nodded once. Thomas exhaled and reached into the satchel. From within, he pulled out a small jar of salve, a clean cloth, and a water flask. His hands shook as he uncorked the bottle. "You shouldn't have spoken to him like that," he muttered, almost to himself. She flinched. He looked up quickly. "I didn't mean it like that. I just mean he was waiting for an excuse." "I know what I said," she whispered. Their eyes met. "You didn't deserve that," he said, quieter now. A silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. Then slowly, gently, Thomas began cleaning the wounds. She bit her lip hard, clenching her fists, refusing to cry out. The cool water stung. The salve burned. He worked in silence, his brow furrowed. The only sounds were the occasional hiss of pain from her and his whispered apologies. "I've seen him do worse," he said after a moment. "Once, he—" "Don't," she interrupted. He paused. She stared ahead, jaw set. "Don't try to tell me stories to make this easier. It won't help." He nodded. "All right." More silence. He finished wrapping the last of the bandages, then leaned back on his heels. His hands were stained red, his sleeves soaked. "Why are you really here?" she asked quietly. Thomas looked down at his hands. "I watched," he said after a long pause. "I watched as they hurt you, and I couldn't move. I just stood there, like a coward." "You didn't scream," he added. "But I wanted to run to you and what?" She interrupted again, bitterly. "Stop them. You would have been dragged down with me." He met her gaze, and his voice dropped. "Maybe that would have been right." Her breath caught. Something in her chest cracked, but she masked it with a scoff. "You think one night of guilt makes you better than the others?" she asked. "You think because you bring me herbs, I'll forget what your family is?" He didn't reply. "Not at first. I don't want to be like them," he said finally. Lena looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You don't get to choose that. Not here." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Then let me choose now. Let me choose you." Silence. Again. Lena stared at him, confused, furious, aching. Her body throbbed, but the pain was no longer the focus. It was him, this boy, this man, sitting before her with eyes full of regret and hands full of blood. "How long have you been watching me?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Thomas looked up. "Since last winter. When you sang that night by the barn, I was on the second-floor window." She turned away, stunned. "You had no right." "I know." She clenched her jaw. "Then why didn't you stay away?" "Because I couldn't," he said simply. He stood slowly, unsure, stepping back. The lantern flickered in his hand. "I'll leave you alone now," he said. "I just wanted you to know you're not alone, not anymore." She didn't respond. He lingered at the door, waiting for something. Maybe a word, maybe a nod, but she gave him nothing, and then he was gone. The door shut quietly behind him. Lena sat in the dark again, the silence louder now. The pain in her back had dulled slightly under the balm, but her chest, her heart, throbbed with confusion. She lay back down, her eyes tracing the beams above her, her thoughts a storm she couldn't calm. Maybe he was just another Whitmore. Maybe this was all a game, but something in his eyes, something in the way he touched her wounds like they hurt him too. It haunted her. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the tall grass. Somewhere in the distance, a hound barked, and inside, in the quiet of the night, Lena whispered to herself, "Fool." But her hand unconsciously touched the edge of the bandage on her shoulder and lingered there. She didn't sleep, neither did he. The cypress trees stood tall, veiled in morning mist, their long, moss-draped limbs swaying gently in the warm southern breeze. Time passed slowly beneath their shade, as if the world outside the plantation didn't exist at all. It was under these trees, far from the eyes of overseers and blood-stained fields, that something fragile had begun to bloom, quietly, secretly. Lena walked carefully, her body still healing, though her posture had returned to its natural strength. Each step was measured, her ears trained to catch even the smallest snap of a twig. She reached the grove where the cypress formed a loose circle, half forgotten by the masters, too marshy and overgrown to be of use to the plantation. Here, the air smelled of earth and moss. Here, she waited. He arrived minutes later, moving silently through the underbrush, boots damp from the morning dew. Thomas didn't speak at first. He only looked at her, as if reassuring himself she was real, that she had truly agreed to meet him again. "You came," he said, breathless. "I didn't think you would." Lena crossed her arms, her voice low and guarded. "I shouldn't have." He nodded, looking down at his feet. "But you did." A moment passed, then another. "I brought something," he said quietly, reaching into the satchel slung over his shoulder. From it he pulled a slim, leather-bound book. Its edges were worn, its spine cracked. "It belonged to my mother. Poems. She used to read them to me when I was small." Lena eyed it with suspicion. "I can't read." Thomas smiled, just a little. "Then I'll read them to you." He sat on a flat patch of grass beneath the nearest tree, looking up at her. The light filtered through the leaves above, dappling his face in gold and green. Slowly, she lowered herself beside him, careful not to put too much pressure on her back. The wounds had closed, but the skin remained tender. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, not looking at him. He flipped open the book, his fingers hesitating on the first page. "Because I want to know who you are." She turned her head toward him. "You mean, apart from being your property?" His hand froze. "You're not," he said, barely above a whisper. "Not to me." "But I am," she replied. "To the world, to your father, to the law." Thomas didn't argue. Instead, he began to read. The poem spoke of longing and distance, of a love bound by silence and separated by stars. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled as he turned the pages. When he finished, he looked up. Lena's expression had softened, just barely. "Your mother," she said, after a while. "She was kind." Thomas nodded. "Too kind for this place." "Did she know what your father did? To people like me?" His throat tightened. She tried to look away. Then she wasn't kind. She was afraid. Thomas didn't respond. The truth of her words settled like dust between them. The next time they met under the cypress trees, it was raining. Lena arrived soaked, her hair clinging to her face, her dress heavy with water. Thomas was already there, waiting, holding a small oilcloth to protect his satchel. He stood as she approached, eyes wide with worry. "You shouldn't have come in this weather," he said, And yet here I am, she replied. He smiled faintly. Stubborn. Survivor, she corrected. They sat beneath the largest tree, where the branches formed a canopy thick enough to block most of the rain. He pulled a second book from his bag, this one thinner, older. She didn't ask about it. Instead, she spoke first. My mother used to sing when she worked. The songs were soft, from back home. Her voice kept rhythm better than the overseer's whip. Thomas listened, silent and attentive. She taught me a few, said they came from her village, across the ocean. I don't remember the words, not all of them, just the melody. He looked at her, eyes warm with curiosity. Will you sing one? She hesitated, and then, slowly, she began. Her voice was low, weathered by years of dust and smoke, but still beautiful, achingly so. It wrapped around the trees, mixing with the sound of rain and wind, forming something otherworldly. Thomas closed his eyes, letting the melody pull him somewhere far away. When she stopped, the air felt colder. I've never heard anything like that, he said softly. You wouldn't have. That day, they didn't speak of the plantation. They didn't speak of the rules or the chains or the whip. They only sat in the rain, surrounded by silence and sound, breathing the same damp air. As days turned to weeks, their meetings continued, always secret, always brief. The danger never left, but neither did the pull between them. Thomas brought more books. Lena brought stories. He told her about constellations and rivers and politics. She told him about ghosts, dreams, and the women who whispered to each other at night when the men were asleep. He taught her how to write her name in the dirt. She laughed when he stumbled over the song she tried to teach him. One afternoon, as the sun sank low, they lay side by side beneath the trees, their hands inches apart. Lena turned to him, eyes narrowed. You ever think about running? He stared up at the leaves above. Every day, and yet you stay. He looked at her then, his face serious. Because if I leave without you, I'd never forgive myself. Her breath caught. You think it's that simple? She asked. You think we just go, and everything changes? No, he said. I think we'd have to fight for every breath, but at least we'd be free. She sat up, wiping her hands on her skirt. You don't know what it means to run, to hide, to watch every stranger's face and wonder if they'll turn you in. I don't, he admitted, but I want to learn with you. She stared at him for a long time. Then, without thinking, she reached out and touched his hand. It was the first time their skin met outside of pain or healing. His fingers closed gently around hers, and the world stopped. Neither of them spoke. That night, when Lena returned to her quarters, the women inside stared at her with a quiet knowing. No one said anything, but their glances were heavy. The next morning, the overseer watched her too long, and that was when Lena knew someone had seen them. She didn't tell Thomas right away. Instead, she began watching the faces around her more carefully, those of the other workers, the overseers, even the kitchen staff. Whispers passed behind her back. Laughter stopped when she walked into a room. But still, she went to the cypress grove. Thomas noticed her hesitation, the way her eyes darted toward shadows, the way her voice had quieted. They know, she finally told him one evening. He froze. Who? I don't know. Someone. More than one. Doesn't matter. His jaw tightened. Then we have to stop. It's not safe anymore. She looked at him, her voice bitter. It was never safe, Thomas. I won't let anything happen to you. You don't have that power. He stepped forward, gripping her arms. Then let me try, let me do something. She pulled away. What? Burn your name? Deny your blood? You think love changes what I am to them? I don't care what they think, he snapped. You should, she said, her voice cracking, because I have to. A long silence fell between them. The trees no longer felt like sanctuary. They felt like walls closing in. He broke the silence. We can leave. I have money. I know a man who can take us north. Her heart raced. You'd give up everything, she asked. The house, the land, your name. I'd give up more than that. She stared at him. eyes wide. Why? His voice shook. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe, like I'm not drowning in all the lies I've been raised on. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. You don't know what love is, she said. Not yet. Then show me, he whispered. She reached for him, pulled him into a kiss. Soft, slow, and full of all the fear neither of them had dared speak. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his. If we run, she said, we run for real. No turning back. No turning back, he echoed, and somewhere in the woods beyond the grove, a twig snapped. Someone had been watching. The days that followed felt different, heavier, as if the very air around the plantation had turned thick with suspicion. Lena could feel it in the way the overseer's eyes lingered on her too long, in the way some of the older workers suddenly became distant, cautious in their words, glancing toward the big house whenever they spoke to her. A quiet warning passed through the glances, unspoken but undeniable. She had crossed a line. Someone had seen her with Thomas. Someone had told. She moved through her chores with precision, doing exactly as she was told, no more, no less. But inside, her chest tightened with every passing day. Each step felt like walking on glass. She didn't know who knew, only that someone did. Then, on a damp morning just before sunrise, Lena was pulled from her usual task of gathering water. One of the younger overseers, a wiry man with a crooked grin, handed her a new assignment. "Field's been reassigned," he said, his voice dry. "You're in the Southern Rose now. Alone." She didn't question it. She only nodded and went. The Southern Rose were further out, past the second fence line, hidden by trees, isolated. The work was rougher, harder soil, more tangled roots. No one worked there by choice. It wasn't punishment, not officially, but it was clear enough. They wanted her out of sight. That evening, she returned to her quarters with her back aching and hands blistered. When she walked in, the room fell silent. The other women avoided her eyes. One of them, an older woman named Ruth, finally spoke. "You need to be careful, child." Lena paused, looking at her. "What do you mean?" Ruth looked toward the door before answering. "The walls got ears. People got mouths. That boy of yours, he's being watched." "I'm not a fool," Lena said quietly. "No," Ruth replied. "You're not. But love makes fools of the best of us." Lena said nothing, but those words stuck with her deep into the night. Elsewhere, in the large house at the top of the hill, Thomas faced his own suspicions. It began with glances from the staff. Then came the questions from his father. "You been down by the worker sheds lately?" Colonel Whitmore asked over supper. Slicing into a piece of meat, Thomas, seated stiffly across the table, looked up. "Why?" The colonel didn't look at him. "Heard some talk. You keeping yourself busy out there?" "I checked the fields," Thomas said, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Same as always." The colonel leaned back in his chair, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "You're of age now, son," he said. "You'll be taking this place one day. A man can't run a plantation if he don't understand the order of things." Thomas didn't reply. The colonel's eyes narrowed. "You got something to say?" "No, sir," Thomas replied, jaw clenched. His father studied him for a long moment. "Good, because if I ever catch you sniffing around one of them..." The pause was long, cold. "I'll end it. You hear me, boy?" Thomas nodded slowly, rage burning behind his eyes. Later that night, he snuck out of the house. The grove was darker than usual. Clouds smothered the moon, and wind hissed through the trees. Lena was already there, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale in the faint light. "They reassigned me," she said, not waiting for him to speak. "I'm alone in the Southern Rose now." Thomas cursed under his breath. "They know. I don't know how many, but someone saw us. I think Ruth is trying to protect me." He stepped forward, voice urgent. "We don't have time. My father suspects something too. He said..." He broke off, shaking his head. "He said if he finds out, he'll kill us." Lena closed her eyes. Then we stop. No more meetings. No more books. No more poems. No, Thomas said, reaching for her. We leave soon. We don't wait anymore. Lena stepped back. It's not that simple. It is if we make it. She stared at him. Where would we go? How far do you think we'd get before someone puts a bullet in your back or drags me back in chains? I know someone, he said quickly, at the next town over. He can help us, get us north. Her voice trembled. Thomas, I don't want to die. Then let's live. Let's run, please. His eyes searched hers, desperate, filled with something raw and real. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to say yes. But before she could answer, a branch snapped behind them. They both turned sharply, breath caught. Who's there? Thomas called out. Silence. Then, footsteps running, fast, fading. Someone had been listening. They didn't chase. They couldn't risk being seen. Thomas turned to Lena, his voice hoarse. We have to go now. No, she said. Not tonight. That was a warning. If we leave now, we won't make it. Let it settle. Give it 2 days. Thomas's fists clenched. 2 days, and then we run. I swear it. She nodded. They parted without another word. The next morning, Lena was roused before dawn by harsh hands on her shoulders. Up! The overseer barked. You got new orders. She was taken not to the Southern Rose, but to the wash house, a small stone building behind the main house. Hot, steamy, isolated, the kind of place no one asked questions about. She scrubbed linens in silence, sweat pouring down her back. Her hands ached. But worse than the labor was the knowledge that something had changed. The reassignment wasn't punishment. It was containment. They were keeping her close, watching her. Meanwhile, Thomas wasn't allowed to leave the house. His father had called for him before breakfast. I've made a decision, the colonel said, pacing the drawing room. You're going to Georgia next week. Couple months. Help with your uncle's cotton lot. Get you back to focus. Thomas stared at him. I'm not going anywhere. You are if you want to keep your name. I never asked for your name. The colonel turned slowly, eyes narrowing. You think I don't know what's going on? Thomas said nothing. You think I raised a fool boy? He spat. You think you can sneak off in the woods and no one will notice? The silence between them grew dangerous. She's a slave, the colonel said, voice like venom. A field rat. You don't touch that. You don't even look at that. I'm not you, Thomas growled. No, his father replied coldly. You're worse, because you think you're better. Thomas turned and walked out before his rage boiled over. He ran, not walked, back to the grove, but she wasn't there. Lena, that day, was kept in the wash house until the sun was high and her arms were numb. When she was finally released, Ruth found her. They're sending him away, Ruth whispered. Word from the kitchen. Your boy's leaving in days. Lena's heart sank. That night, she went to the grove. She waited until the moon rose high and the sounds of the plantation died down. And finally, Thomas appeared. They said nothing at first. They just stood in the darkness, their eyes locked, breathing the same tense air. They're sending me to Georgia, he said. I know. I'm not going. She took his hands. You don't have a choice. We leave tomorrow night. I've arranged everything. The trader, he owes me. He'll take us. We leave through the river path. She hesitated. If they catch us, they won't. You don't know that. He stepped closer. I know I love you. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. I love you too, she whispered. They embraced tightly, silently. Tomorrow night it would begin. But someone had already set the pieces in motion. Because at that very moment, in the shadows near the grove, the overseer who'd reassigned Lena stood beneath the trees, watching, listening, and smiling. The storm rolled in just after sundown. Heavy clouds pressed low against the horizon, casting the entire plantation into an uneasy dusk even before night officially fell. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the wind stirred the fields, bending the tall grass as if nature itself were anxious, anticipating what was to come. Inside the slave quarters, Lena packed her things quietly, if they could even be called things. A small cloth satchel, a piece of bread wrapped in linen, a silver button from her mother's old dress, which she kept for luck. She moved quickly, silently, her fingers steady despite the pounding in her chest. She'd waited years for a moment like this. Freedom had never seemed real, only the stuff of whispered stories, of daring escapes that usually ended in blood. But now, it wasn't just a dream. It had shape, a plan, a path. A man who had promised to risk everything to walk it with her. The trader Thomas spoke of had agreed to meet them at the edge of the forest just before midnight, near the bend in the river where the reeds grew thick and high. From there, they'd travel by wagon under false names, hidden beneath bales of cotton until they reached the next state. Then north. Then further still. If they made it past the first night, they had a chance. Lena wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside, ducking beneath the arch of the doorway. Rain began to fall in slow, heavy drops, soaking the ground almost instantly. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds. Perfect cover. She moved quickly through the compound, avoiding the light from the windows of the main house. The quarters were still and dark. Most were asleep or pretending to be. Ruth had seen her leave but said nothing. She simply reached out, gripped Lena's hand for a moment, and let her go. At the grove, Thomas waited, already soaked through. His coat clung to his skin, and his boots were caked in mud. But when he saw her, his face changed, not with relief, but with urgency. "We have to go now," he said. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he grabbed her hand and began pulling her through the trees toward the river path. "Thomas, they know. Someone told. My father's sending men out tonight. Dogs, too. If we're not gone before they start the search, it's over." Lena felt her blood turn cold. "How much time do we have?" "An hour. Maybe less." The river path was thick with mud and shadows. Branches scraped their faces as they moved, but they didn't stop. Every sound made them freeze, every twig that snapped, every sudden gust of wind through the trees. The rain intensified, drumming against the leaves above, masking their footsteps. When they reached the bend, the trader was already there, a short, stocky man with a lantern held low. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and smelled of tobacco and sweat. "You're late," he muttered. "We're here," Thomas said. "That's what matters." The trader grunted, nodding toward the back of the wagon. "Get in fast." Lena climbed in first, followed by Thomas. They nestled between the cotton bales as the trader threw a tarp over them. The smell was musty, suffocating, but it was safety for now. The wagon creaked as it moved, wheels struggling in the mud. They didn't speak. Lena lay with her back pressed against Thomas's chest, his arm around her, their bodies rigid with tension. After what felt like hours, the wagon stopped. Voices outside. "Who goes there?" someone shouted. Lena's breath caught. The trader replied smoothly, "Delivering for the colonel's brother. He's expecting this load by sunup." A pause. "You hear about the runaway? They're saying the boy's gone too. Colonel's furious." Another pause. Then, "You ain't seen nothing?" "No, sir. Been on this road since dusk. Ain't got time for nothing but work." A longer silence. Then, reluctantly, "Move along." The wagon creaked again. Inside, Thomas and Lena didn't move, not until the sounds of the patrol had vanished into the night. When they finally stopped for real, hours later, it was still raining. The trader yanked the tarp back and helped them down, pointing toward a low shack built near the river's edge. "You wait there till first light," he said. "Then I'll get you across. But we ain't out of danger yet. You stay quiet. You hear me?" They nodded. Inside the shack, they stripped out of their soaked clothes and huddled beneath a rough wool blanket. The air was cold and wet, the floor dirt, but it was the first place neither of them had to pretend. Lena turned toward him. You really left it all behind. Thomas looked into her eyes. I'd leave it again. Every day. I don't know what happens next, she whispered. We survive, he said. Together. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, but neither of them slept. Just before dawn, the trader returned. Time to move, he said. They followed him to a small canoe hidden among the reeds. The river was high and fast, swollen from the night's storm. The air was thick with mist. They climbed in, and the trader pushed them off into the current. The water churned around them, threatening to tip the boat. Lena gripped the sides, her knuckles white. Thomas sat behind her, watching the banks as they drifted. Halfway across, a shout rang out behind them. There! In the river! Lena turned just in time to see two men on horseback burst from the trees, rifles raised. One of them fired. The shot cracked through the morning air, splintering the stillness. Faster! Thomas shouted to the trader, but it was too late. A second shot rang out, and the trader cried out, falling back in the canoe. The boat rocked violently, water spilling over the sides. Lena screamed. Thomas grabbed the paddle, fighting to keep them upright. The bank was only a few yards away. Jump! He shouted. He dove into the water, grabbing Lena as he did. They hit the surface hard, the cold biting into their skin. The current dragged them, pulling them under. Thomas kicked furiously, holding onto her with everything he had. Another shot, then another. They surfaced just long enough to gasp for air before the river took them again. When they finally reached the far bank, they crawled onto the muddy shore, gasping, coughing, shaking from the cold. Thomas collapsed beside her, blood blooming from his side. No, 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 Lena said, her hands searching his shirt. I'm fine, he muttered, his teeth clenched. It's not deep, but the blood didn't stop. She tore off her shawl, pressing it to the wound. We're not safe yet, he said, grabbing her hand. We have to move. She looked at him, her face torn between fear and fury. You're not going anywhere like this. I'll crawl if I have to, he said through gritted teeth, but we don't stop now. With his arm around her shoulders, she helped him to his feet. Together, they limped toward the woods, disappearing into the trees. Behind them, the river roared. The forest swallowed them whole, dense with wet leaves and tangled undergrowth. The trees stretched endlessly in every direction. Branches dripped with rain, and the ground was thick with mud, making every step a struggle. Lena's arms ached from supporting Thomas's weight, his blood still seeping through the fabric pressed against his side. He leaned on her, his breathing shallow, every few steps broken by a sharp wince he tried to hide. They didn't speak at first. The only sound between them was the squelch of soaked boots and the distant roar of the river behind them. Time seemed to slow in the trees, bending with their exhaustion and fear. We have to stop, Lena finally whispered. Thomas shook his head, but the effort made him stumble. She caught him before he hit the ground. You're bleeding through again, she said, already kneeling. She unwrapped the damp cloth from his side and winced at what she saw. The wound wasn't gushing, but it was deep and messy. The bullet had grazed just enough to tear flesh and muscle, and now, days without rest or real medicine had begun to show. We need fire, she said. You won't last the night like this. He didn't argue. They found shelter in a small hollow beneath a crooked cypress tree, its roots gnarled and thick, forming a sort of natural wall against the wind. Lena gathered wet leaves and moss, scraping at bark to find dry wood beneath the surface. Her fingers were numb, raw from the cold and the frantic work. When she finally sparked a fire from the last of the dry twigs and a shard of flint she found in the trader's pack, it was weak but warm. Thomas sat propped against the tree, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill in the air. Don't fall asleep, she said firmly, crouching in front of him. Stay with me. He blinked slowly, nodding. I'm trying. Lena pressed the cleaner edge of a torn shirt against the wound and reached for a handful of crushed leaves she'd foraged. They weren't true medicine, but she remembered Ruth whispering about their use, about how her grandmother swore by them for drawing out fever. You trust those leaves more than a doctor, Thomas asked, his voice weak but teasing. She gave him a sharp look. Do you see any doctors out here? He smiled faintly, but it faded quickly into a grimace of pain. I'm sorry, he said after a long pause. For what? For bringing you into this, she scoffed. You didn't bring me. I chose. You could have said no. I should have, she admitted, but I didn't. The fire popped, casting long shadows across their faces. I keep thinking, he whispered, about what comes next, about if there even is a next. There is, she said quietly. There has to be. He looked up at her, eyes glossy. You believe that? I have to. She sat beside him, her back against the roots, the fire crackling softly in front of them. For a moment, there was peace. But peace never lasted long. At dawn, the sound of dogs broke the silence. Far off, maybe half a mile, their barks echoed through the trees, angry and fast. Lena jolted upright. Thomas tried to move, but she held him down. They're tracking us, she said. We have to go. Thomas tried to stand. The pain twisted his face. I can't outrun dogs like this. Then we'll outsmart them. She doused the fire with dirt and ash, smearing both over their skin and clothes to mask the scent. Then she wrapped her arms around him and began dragging, half lifting him toward a shallow stream just beyond the ridge. The water was cold enough to burn. They moved through it slowly, feet slipping on rocks, the current trying to pull them down. She kept him upright, whispering to him every few steps, anything to keep him alert. After nearly 20 minutes in the water, they climbed out and vanished into thicker brush, leaving no footprints behind. By midday, the barking had faded, but Thomas was fading too. He collapsed near an old wooden cabin, long abandoned and half swallowed by vines. Lena pushed the door open with her shoulder. Inside, it was dark and musty. The roof leaked, but the walls were strong. She dragged him in, laid him on a cot that creaked under his weight, and searched the cabin for anything useful. A rusted kettle, a tin cup, a rotted blanket. It wasn't much, but it was something. She boiled water from a barrel outside, then soaked more cloth and pressed it to his forehead. He drifted in and out of sleep, murmuring names she didn't know. She sat beside him, stroking his hair gently. I'm here, she whispered. You're not alone. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. By nightfall, Thomas was worse. His skin was clammy, his lips cracked. She tried singing again, one of her mother's songs, slow and quiet, like a prayer. But she knew. She could see it in the way his body didn't fight anymore. I won't let you die, she said, her voice breaking. Not like this. Not after everything. His eyes opened, just barely. Lena! Don't speak, she whispered. He reached for her hand. She took it, pressing it to her cheek. If I don't make it, you will. He smiled faintly. If I don't, you keep going. Don't wait for me. She shook her head violently. Don't you say that. But his eyes were already closing. In the middle of the night, she heard the distant crack of a branch. Then footsteps. She froze. Someone was coming. She grabbed the rusted kettle and crouched near the door. A shadow passed by the window. She held her breath. A second figure followed. Then nothing. Whoever it was, they didn't knock, didn't call out. Minutes passed, then hours. By morning, the only sound was the rustle of leaves and Thomas's slow, shallow breathing. She checked his wound. It hadn't worsened. If anything, the fever had broken just slightly. It gave her hope. They stayed another day, then another. On the third morning, a wagon rolled down the path near the edge of the forest. A lone trader passed by, humming to himself, not noticing the eyes watching from behind the vines. He moved slow, too slow. As he passed, Lena stepped out. She didn't wave, she didn't speak, but he saw her. His eyes widened. He tipped his hat once, nothing more, and continued down the road. No words, but the message was clear. He had seen them. He would not tell. That night, Lena sat beside Thomas as he finally slept deeply, his color returning. She looked out the window at the moonlight on the trees. They weren't safe. They weren't free, but they were alive. And somewhere out there, maybe, just maybe, there was a road that led to more than just survival. Maybe there was a road to freedom, to something that could last. No one knew where Lena and Thomas went after that. Some say they made it to the north. Others claim they died in those woods. But a few, those who still believe in love stronger than chains, whisper another story. That two souls once ran into the dark and never looked back. That they lived, and that somewhere they still do. Let me know if you would like a continuation, spin-off, or alternate version. Some chains are made of iron, others are made of fear, of silence, of rules passed down by men who forgot how to feel. But love, real love, doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for the world to change. Sometimes it is the change. Lena and Thomas risked everything not just to escape a place, but to escape a way of living that told them they couldn't belong to each other. Now it's your turn to speak. Do you think they made it? What would you have done in their place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your voice. And don't forget to watch the next powerful story. It's already on your screen, just waiting to be discovered.